Prince William was only moments away from opening a sensitive royal consultation when he stopped at the entrance to the chamber. The room had been prepared for a tightly controlled Windsor summit, a private gathering intended to shape the royal household. Senior family members were expected to discuss residences, private assets, ceremonial responsibilities, household authority, and the gradual transfer of duties during King Charles's reign. The guest list was deliberately narrow. Only selected family members, 2 constitutional advisors, the King's private secretary, and approved officials were supposed to be present. Personal lawyers were excluded to keep the conversation internal. Yet, before William had even taken his seat, he noticed an unauthorized man near the King's advisors, Camilla's private lawyer. The lawyer appeared at ease. Beside him rested a sealed leather folder and a set of confidential briefing papers. He did not look like someone who had wandered into the wrong room. He looked prepared. William paused, surveyed the table, and understood that something was wrong. He had expected resistance during the meeting. There were already disagreements over Windsor apartments, private collections, staff responsibilities, and what authority would eventually pass to him as his role increased. He had prepared himself for difficult arguments, but he had expected those arguments to happen openly. Instead, he found a private representative seated inside a restricted consultation before the king had even arrived. Camilla remained in her chair and urged William not to misunderstand the situation. She explained that the lawyer was present to protect her interests. From her perspective, that protection mattered. Her future residence, staff, security, and ceremonial position could all become uncertain if Charles reduced his duties or if power gradually shifted toward the heir. But William focused on a different issue. He asked why protecting her interests required access that nobody else had approved. The question brought the room to a standstill. Advisors looked down. The private secretary checked the official attendance list. There was no authorization. The lawyer's name did not appear among the approved participants. William closed his briefing folder and placed it on the table. He announced that the Windsor summit was cancelled immediately. He would not discuss a single item until officials established who had admitted the lawyer and how confidential material had reached him. He instructed everyone to leave their papers behind and ordered the room secured. The decision was abrupt, but to William, the problem was no longer about one unexpected guest. If someone could place an unauthorized private representative inside such a sensitive meeting, then the integrity of the entire process had been compromised. The situation became even more serious because Charles had not yet entered the room. The monarch had not taken his seat, yet someone had apparently tried to establish a new reality before he arrived. As the attendees left, William noticed 4 words embossed on the lawyer's folder: Windsor Household Continuity, Private Instructions. The title suggested that the man had not come merely to observe or offer general advice. He appeared to have arrived with a prepared plan concerning the future structure of the royal household. Behind the cancelled meeting were 3 competing anxieties. William saw himself as the guardian of an institution he would one day be required to lead. As Prince of Wales, he believed that any long-term arrangement involving royal property, staff, or authority needed to pass through a clear family process. A hidden agreement made during his father's reign could become an obligation in his own. Camilla viewed the same future from a far more vulnerable position. Her place depended heavily on Charles. She feared that once his active protection weakened, her household, residence, security, and role could be reconsidered by people whose priorities were different from his. Charles stood between them, husband to one and father to the other, facing the possibility that the 2 people closest to him no longer trusted each other. William did not treat the cancellation as a victory. The scene revived memories of earlier royal conflicts in which private arrangements, divided households, and closed-door decisions gradually produced deeper mistrust. He had watched secrecy become a source of institutional damage before, and he was determined not to allow the same pattern to shape the next reign. But that determination came with a cost. Challenging Camilla meant challenging his father's wife, and doing so risked reopening tensions Charles had spent years trying to contain. When Charles was informed, he was in his private study. He removed his glasses, set them beside the papers on his desk, and asked one direct question. Who authorized the lawyer? His private secretary checked the secured access record. There was no approval from the king, from William, or from the Windsor Secretariat. Then a more troubling detail appeared. The visitor's name had been added less than an hour before the summit. The late entry meant that the lawyer's presence was not a long-standing administrative decision. Someone had inserted him into the process at the last possible moment. When officials traced the request, they found that it had come through Camilla's private household, where he had been described as an essential advisor. William read the record twice. What had looked like an awkward surprise now appeared to be the final step in a plan that had begun weeks earlier. The cancelled summit was only the visible explosion. The real conflict had started long before William reached that doorway. Weeks before the cancelled summit, the dispute had begun in a quieter room and under far less dramatic circumstances. During a small gathering at Windsor, Camilla's lawyer placed a proposed household memorandum beside her teacup. At first glance, it looked like an administrative document. It addressed her future residence, permanent access to certain spaces, staff arrangements, and other protections she might need if Charles reduced his public duties. But the final clauses went further. They touched questions of authority that William believed should belong to the next reign, rather than be fixed privately during the current one. Tension was already building around the future management of Windsor apartments, ceremonial jewelry, household staff, invitations, and personal security. William wanted all proposed changes circulated before the larger family summit so that every senior participant could examine them together. To him, that was the safest way to prevent temporary arrangements from quietly becoming permanent policy. Camilla saw the same procedure as a threat. If every protection had to survive William's future approval, she feared that her home, staff, security, and ceremonial role could eventually depend on his goodwill. According to the account presented in the original narrative, Camilla expressed that fear with unusual bitterness after one planning discussion. She insisted that she did not want her future to rest entirely on William's decisions. Her lawyer then began developing language intended to preserve her position beyond Charles's active reign. What had started as a concern about personal security was becoming a strategy for long-term influence. The decisive step came 3 weeks before the summit. During a memorial planning meeting, Camilla's representative introduced a draft called the Queen's Household Continuity Memorandum. A memorial meeting was supposed to deal with tributes, guest arrangements, and family responsibilities connected to remembrance. It was not intended to settle future power. Yet the draft proposed lasting control over selected Windsor rooms, influence over certain staff appointments, and continued access to ceremonial possessions. By introducing it in that setting, the lawyer moved a debate about future authority into a gathering where few participants expected to confront it. Later that evening, William reviewed a copy with Catherine. He read through the pages until he reached the final clause, then stopped. He believed the document was trying to convert privileges connected to Charles's reign into permanent rights that could restrict the next monarch. Catherine could hear how personally he took the issue. He had asked for transparency, but legal wording had been prepared outside the family process. Even after seeing the draft, William agreed to attend the Windsor summit. He did so only after receiving a written assurance that Camilla's personal lawyer would not participate. That promise changed the meaning of everything he encountered on the morning of the meeting. When he entered the chamber and saw the same lawyer already seated with confidential material, William did not see a scheduling mistake. He saw a deliberate breach of an agreement. After cancelling the summit, William followed Camilla into a small adjoining reception room. There were no officials between them and no formal speeches to soften the confrontation. Camilla repeated that the lawyer was there to protect her interests. William pointed back toward the abandoned chamber and replied that private interests had just been inserted into a meeting about the future of the crown. He reminded her that everyone had agreed personal lawyers would remain outside. Camilla tried to explain the pressure she felt. The summit could influence her residence, household staff, security, and ceremonial position for years. She wanted independent advice before decisions became irreversible. William answered that independent advice was not the issue. The problem was that her representative had entered early, received restricted papers, and taken his place before several approved attendees had arrived. To William, the timing looked designed to make the lawyer's presence appear normal before anyone had a chance to object. Then Camilla's composure broke. She told him that procedure was easy to defend when one's future was guaranteed. William would inherit authority, residences, security, and a permanent place at the center of royal life. Her own position could change, with a single decision, after Charles was gone. She argued that fear, not ambition, had driven her actions. William did not dismiss that fear, but he believed it did not justify crossing an agreed boundary. He asked the question that now mattered most: who had given the lawyer the confidential summit papers? Camilla did not answer. Her silence widened the crisis. If she could not explain how her lawyer obtained the agenda, then the breach involved more than unauthorized access. Someone inside the royal household had supplied restricted material before the meeting. Officials stopped the lawyer before he could leave Windsor and inspected his sealed folder under palace security procedures. Inside, they found an annotated agenda and proposed amendments